Hi, everybody. Hello. Hello, everybody. This is Zero Hour. Mm, it's the 13th episode today. We're going to talk about SDS, which is Students for Democratic Society, and the Weather Underground. Uh, it's very important that we talk about Students for a Democratic Society because they were a movement of student organization that was founded in the mid to late 1960s. I'm not talking about the Students for a Democratic Society that was incorporated in 2006. That's a contemporary one that's does not have any historical link to the original one, except for perhaps their motives and their goals. So, the Students for Democratic Society, the original one in the late '60s, started out as a student organization across campuses of the United States, and they were student movements were they were against the draft. They were against the Vietnam War. They they were quite pivotal in the summer of love and the movement that sort of you can say radicalized, um, not radicalized, no, not radicalized, emerged the new left. Cannot say radicalized. And this is the reason why I don't say radicalized, because um, the Weather Underground was uh, the portion of the Student for a Democratic Society that, over the course of time, was radicalized. And they, just to give you a brief history, they offshooted out and became violent, militant. They became a militant organization. And some believe, and there are still many people who are part of the Weather Underground who are alive. If you look for documentaries in your respective places where you get your videos or movies and such, look for the Weather Underground. There's a documentary about it. It's really good, and they interview people who were former members of the Weather Underground and SDS, Students for a Democratic Society. Now, mind you, you could you could be Students for a Democratic Society member and not be part of the Weather Underground, but you couldn't be a Weather Underground member without having formally associated with the Students for a Democratic Society. So it was kind of like the Students for a Democratic Society had the noble impetus of liberalizing society and moved forward with that and made good strides in terms of the draft and then in terms of the war, the Vietnam War. But then it splintered out, and we don't know. Even the documentary doesn't really give you too much about how the splintering happened, but ideologies went their separate ways. I don't know if propaganda had anything to do with it. I don't know if the GOP's machinery of retention of the white man's property rights as their central tenet was an operating machine at that time. Probably was, because Nixon was active in politics during that time. And so were his contemporaries. And I believe McCarthyism was just coming to an end. It's been a long time since I've gone back to American History 101. So, God, I'm old. When was that? 2001. Yeah, nearing 20 years now. So, because I do this unscripted, I want to be clear that this is for your information as a frame of reference. You shouldn't take me as a reference. You should go out there and look up the Weather Underground. You should go up there and look up Students for a Democratic Society, not the one that was organized in 2006, but the one that was organized in the 1960s. And the reason why I'm talking to everybody and talking now about this is because of the previous video, the previous episode, which was episode 12, that was talking about what's happening now that Donald has uh, effectively defied the Supreme Court's decree uh, and in his Twitter diatribes continues to claim victory. And we are going to know what happens as this unfolds, because as the days come, today, as you wake up, and today will be the day that electors in their respective states are going to count the votes and they're going to cast their votes, and uh, that's like one of the final seals of approval. And then on January 6th, after the elections in Georgia, which you need to vote for if you're registered to vote in Georgia. And I believe that early voting is starting soon. Please check uh, Georgia's Secretary of State website. But January 6th is going to be the day that the Electoral College votes are counted in Congress, where Mike Pence is going to be presiding over the count and then declaring the winner. So we have to be careful. We have to watch out for what happens, because we have to watch out for how he responds to these two events. And the more and if he continues to contest it, if he continues to deny it, if he continues to say no, the Electoral College is bunk, then it's going to go one step closer now out of having completed the elements, how I believe it, of seditious conspiracy, moving on to sedition and treason, which is you pending and setting aside the results of a free and fair democratic election, and getting in the way of our legitimate president-elect Joe Biden from taking office on January 20th. So we have to watch what he says. If after today's count in the respective states he says, okay, fine, I'll accept this, then okay, we're done. But we still have to stay vigilant until January 20th to make sure that any inciting that he does on Twitter or on any other platform isn't turned a blind eye to, but taken note of for subsequent attorney generals. And also to pay attention to his agents. And the reason why that's important, his agents in the different groups, like the Proud Boys and the pro-Trump rallies that are full of these fractious elements, right? Fractious elements, much like Weather Underground was from Students for a Democratic Society. Now, mind you, that was more of a left movement. This is a right movement. But today we also have the left side of it, which is the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's sort of, as the GOP and as Donald is trying to portray it, that somehow Antifa is the Weather Underground equivalent of the Black Lives Matter movement, when they actually have nothing to do with one another. This is propaganda. The Black Lives Matter movement started when it became clear to every American that not safe on the streets of America without being persecuted and murdered, or even in their homes with Breonna Taylor, being persecuted and killed and murdered and being put into the prison system at disproportionate rates, and for drug crimes based on a drug war theory that has failed abysmally, and now have become the primary victims of COVID, because the jail systems across the United States, and no one's talking about this, are overflowing with COVID positives. So are they going to get the vaccines too? When are they going to get the vaccines? I'd like to know. So, because they're also human beings, they are incarcerated, but they're Americans paying their time for what they have done. Understand the basis of the judicial and criminal justice system, which is, restitution and retribution, but also rehabilitation and measure with good measure and without violating the Eighth Amendment, which is cruel and unusual punishment. So that's where the Black Lives Matter movement started. And the Antifa movement started when we realized that we had a fascist for a president who was xenophobic, racist, homophobic, but on the surface quite good with everybody, because there are good people on both sides, because he wants everybody's votes, and then he ends up losing the vote by 7 million popular votes. And as it stands now, 306 to 232, he's losing the electoral count. And Joe Biden's received more votes than any president to be in American history, which is over 81 million votes. And Donald Trump is 7 million votes behind. But he continues he's defied the Supreme Court. That's one of the steps. Now we're going to see if he defies the electoral college counts in their states and continues to cast doubt on the legitimacy of Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona. If he continues to do that, that's another one of those tenets broken and moving closer and closer to sedition and treason. And then finally, we're going to have to see what happens after January 6th, because we know what the result is going to be and what Mike Pence is going to have to do. He's not going to do something that Donald Trump wants. He's going to do what the Constitution requires of him. He doesn't have any discretion. He does not have discretion, mind you. The presiding officer of an electoral college count does not have discretion in changing the vote count. They are obligated to report the vote and declare the winner. That's their job. That's it. So even after that day, if he continues, then you know that he has moved into sedition and treason. And at that time, it's going to be very important to be able to distinguish between Trump supporters who are pro-Trump supporters, two of whom I encountered on Twitter yesterday, who are saying, oh my goodness, what a mistake I've made. And I was like, are you even a real person? And they're like, I'm going to give you my registration and my voter registration card and where I voted and my name if you want. I can't believe I'm seeing this. Supreme Court said this. I've watched the news for the last 7 weeks. I don't see any fraud. I want my money back. And that's another American telling me the story of how he's duped. So, there are these Trump supporters who were duped, who were die-hard conservative Republicans and evangelicals, but good-hearted people and not racist, not xenophobic, but duped. So we have to distinguish between that and the criminal elements and the militant elements, which is the Proud Boys and anybody inciting violence. I'll tell you a story that I haven't said this before, but I was watching, I don't know if y'all watched, there was I don't know where it was. There were so many protests and people have been killed this year, where they burned down the Wendy's, where the man who was in the parking lot got shot when he was sleeping in his car. So I remember seeing the video footage, and I'm watching the video footage continuously, and this white girl walks in. She was a white girl, and I don't know if that's what she appeared. She was pale. She was white. She didn't have any color. I mean, don't mean to be insulting to white people, but and then she comes out, and then a few minutes later, there's a fire inside. And it turns out it happens to be that person that lit the fire. But we don't know if that person was somebody who was just a pro-Trump supporter or a militant element who went in there to cause the riot and create that strife. That's the whole point. Is that I'm telling you now to identify the difference between the intent of Students for a Democratic Society or pro-Trump supporters who are ultra-conservative and really had faith in their evangelical pastors and leaders and all of this, and Fox News, and the elements of it that want to create discord. Now, there are elements that want to create discord on both sides. That happens to be what the ideology works. But the way that it works is once you instigate something, that cycle of violence, you no longer know who started it first. But you know that the impetus for that violence comes from Donald. You know that. You see that. If there was one common element between all of these things happening and all of these things weakening and hammering and chipping away at the foundations of our democracy, it is him. It is just his ideology that that links it all. They are being brainwashed and dog whistled, and the silver lining is all the hate is coming out, and we can see who the haters are and the hate ideology, so we can study them and figure out where it's coming from. I suspect it's coming from a deep insecurity somewhere with everybody who falls into these militancy groups, these radical understandings, these narrow hold rigid mindsets, these judgmental, prejudicial paradigms. They have something to fear. And a lot of the times that fear comes from not knowing what's going on. And for the last 5, 6, 7 years, Donald Trump has been trumpeting fake news, fake news, fake news to effectively numb you, to say that the news isn't real, because the opposite of fake isn't true. The opposite of fake is real. So he's saying the news is not real. Don't listen to the news at all. Listen to me. And only the people who listen to me. And that is, why would you do that? I mean, would you do that when you're a 15-year-old and your parents told you to do it? Would you do that if you had to, take an exam and somebody who had never passed the bar exam or had never even gotten an LSAT score to get into law school to teach you how to understand the law? He's a confidence man. He gives you the confidence of knowing that you're safe, just so that you will float him as long as he needs to be floated. And then he doesn't give a damn if you sink. It's not that he hates you, he just doesn't give a damn. And we can't have a country that is for the people, by the people, of the people, if we don't care about one another, right? I mean, I'm crawling out of my skin sitting on the other side of the world, being an external patriot who can do physically very little. But whatever I can, I am. Every time somebody wants to give me a gift for my birthday or whatever at Christmas, my family, friends who live back at home in the US, I tell them give it to a food bank. Because I would be doing that. I'd be there doing that. So I'm not, and I'm not really invested in doing that here where I am, because I don't know. I don't have anything invested. I don't have anything invested in where I live. I have everything invested in where my heart lives. And it's in the United States of America that gave me a home, that taught me how to be, who to be, what to do, that taught me right from wrong, that gave me the courage to stand up and say everybody's equal, and gave me the courage to be who I want to be, who I am supposed to be. So if I want to keep that country alive, and if I want to keep that democracy alive, I have to keep doing this, and I have to keep coming out and telling you to go out and learn about these things. So check out Students for a Democratic Society, and check out the Weather Underground. Start to see how militancy operates. And then when the time comes, and it's going to come in the next 5 or 6 weeks, you're going to have to decide how you're going to approach this. Are you going to call everybody who voted for Trump to be racist and xenophobic and be blanketly wrong about it? or are you going to understand that there were people who were duped? Are you going to welcome them back to reality? Are you going to help them cope with how they could have been duped that much? You're going to have to help them with their anger. Because remember, you cannot fight fire with fire without the whole world burning. Let's try to suffocate it out. Let's try to snuff it out. Let's try to douse it out with water. Let's together, let's dampen it down, the hate, and let's focus so that on the days like on January 20th or before that, after January 6th, if there's any violence, it's very easy for authorities to identify the elements of violence. Don't put yourself in harm's way. Don't go somewhere where you think you are threatened. If you feel threatened, document the place, notify authorities, and get out of there. If you feel that you're in a safe place and you can protest, protest. Do what you find to be logical and reasonable, but before you do it, think. It's our country. It doesn't matter what militia, what party, none of it matters. It's our country. And on January 20th, Joe Biden has to take power for our country to move forward. That is the most important thing for you if you're an American. So thank you so much. A few people are watching. I really want to thank my friend Uriel. Her support is just valuable beyond measure to me. I would like to thank every single one of you, who watches, comments, even the ones who hate me. But I'll tell you this, and there has been comments that are factually incorrect about election fraud, for example. And if I don't have verifiable news that I can self-verify through at least 5 or 6 credible sources, and if you want to know how I do research, you can go to my video in No One Unscripted about information, about how to research information, and you'll know how I work, how I operate. So if I don't verify it myself, I find it after what I have looked at to be factually incorrect, I don't post that comment. But other than that, if you have to give me personal jibes and all kinds of nasty comments, I love them. It just gives me more fodder for what I'm going to say to Donald Trump when I go troll his Twitter, So thank you very much. Have a good day.